French Parliament has voted to legalize assisted dying. The lower house approved the legislation after backing it in 3 previous readings. It's the culmination of a years-long debate over end-of-life care in France and a cause championed by President Emmanuel Macron. Even though today's vote is being referred to as the final passage, the law could still be halted by France's Constitutional Council. DW's Tessa Walter is at the National Assembly in Paris. What's come out of this? What changes now?
Yes, there are big changes that come about now, and I just saw the lawmakers come out of the chamber, and there was a tight race, I can tell you. We had 291 votes for the new law, 241 against, and with that it is decided that the parliament has adopted it. As you said, it was a long battle between the more liberal parliament and the more conservative Senate that has rejected this law 3 times. And what will it bring? Well, 2 things. It allows and makes possible the access to assisted suicide here in France, but also euthanasia. Now you might ask, what is exactly the difference between those two? Well, in the first and preferred case, according to the law, the lethal drug will be prescribed by a doctor, but then it will be taken by the patient, him or herself. If this is not possible because the person might be too weak or to do so, then the doctor can intervene. So they can actually inject a lethal drug, for example. That is a special case and something that goes much further than many other European countries, and this is why major safeguards have been put in place by the lawmakers. Just to give you an overview, the first one is that this only applies to adults, so children are not affected and only adults can ask for assisted suicide. They also have to suffer from an uncurable illness, meaning they can't be healed in any way, and they must suffer from unbearable pain, something they perceive unbearable physically or psychologically. And then this is the last point, which I found very important, is they need to make an informed and free choice about their death. So this wish can't be influenced by a third party, but they have to express it themselves. So with these safeguards, the parliament here wanted to avoid any kind of abuse.
It's such a sensitive matter, Tessa. How does the French public feel about this?
It is a very sensitive matter, and I can tell you in the weeks leading up to this vote, I spoke to a lot of people here in Paris, but also across France, and it gets to people because it is a debate that is literally about life and death, and most of us have family members that might be getting older, have been confronted with death, and think about their own death as well. And for them, they argue these are the supporters, and I think most people I spoke to here in France are supporting this law. They argue that this will offer a more dignified way of dying. They say that this offers a freedom of choice. So people being able to endure the suffering, but then also decide when this suffering has to end. They also say that with this, they also can make a decision inside the families that will be helpful for everybody. But there are also the opponents. Opponents argue that, for example, from religious reasons, life is sacred. Life can't be touched upon. And I spoke to even one woman, very Catholic. She said any kind of euthanasia is murder. Then we have people from the left, and they argue, well, actually, instead of giving the French people the right to die, they should rather get the right to better palliative care. So they argue there is not enough of this care present everywhere in France. And they also say that this law might change the way we perceive illness, old age, handicap. They fear that some people who might be without a handicap all their life, then they turn ill and end up in a wheelchair, for example, that they feel pressured into asking for assisted suicide because they feel that now their existence has become a burden to their families and want to alleviate this burden. But the Assembly today says, well, they are safeguards and they will prevent this.
And just briefly, Tessa, where does France now stand in the European context?
It is a complicated picture, but I can tell you there are now 5 countries where euthanasia and assisted suicide are legal. And these are Luxembourg, Belgium, Spain, the Netherlands, and now also France. Other countries, including Germany, Austria and Switzerland, they allow for assisted suicide only. But there are a lot of gray zones. So let's look into the German example, for example. Here, the Constitutional Court ruled in 2020 that the assisted dying, now the assisted suicide, is legal and can't be punished by the law anymore. But then the rules for prescribing drugs are still unclear, because when it comes to prescribing a drug, every doctor has to prescribe something that is helping the patient. And well, prescribing a lethal drug might not necessarily be defined as such. So this is why this legal grey zone makes a lot of doctors reluctant to actually apply the law. And some people then still decide to go to Switzerland and find suicide there.
Tessa Walter joining us from Paris. Thank you.